What if the life you're living right now isn't the one you're meant to stay in? What if the version of yourself you see every day is only a small part of who you could actually become? The truth is that many people spend years stuck in the same routines, the same habits, and the same identity simply because they believe change is too difficult or too late. But reinventing yourself doesn't require a dramatic moment or a perfect plan. It starts with the decision to redefine who you are and who you want to become. In this video, we'll break down a complete guide to rebranding your life, rebuilding your habits, and stepping into a stronger, more intentional version of yourself starting today. There comes a moment in many people's lives when they quietly realize that the version of themselves they have been living as no longer feels right. It might happen after a disappointing experience, a failed goal, a stagnant career, or simply a deep internal feeling that life could be more meaningful than it currently is. This moment is often uncomfortable because it forces us to confront a difficult truth. The life we are living is largely shaped by the identity we have built for ourselves over time. The habits we repeat, the stories we tell ourselves, the way we respond to challenges, and even the expectations we hold about our future all come from this internal identity. If the identity remains the same, the results in life tend to remain the same as well. Many people try to change their lives by focusing only on external actions. They set goals, start new routines, or promise themselves that they will be more disciplined starting tomorrow. But after a few days or weeks, those efforts often fade away. The reason this happens is not a lack of motivation or intelligence. The deeper reason is that their internal identity has not changed. When your internal identity still sees you as someone who procrastinates, someone who lacks discipline, or someone who is always stuck in the same cycle, your behavior will eventually return to match that identity. True transformation begins when you decide to redesign the way you see yourself. Reinventing yourself is not about pretending to be someone else or copying the lifestyle of another person. It is about intentionally creating a new version of yourself that aligns with the life you want to build. Rebranding yourself means reshaping how you show up in the world, how you carry yourself, and how others perceive your presence. Reinventing yourself means building the habits, mindset, and actions that support this new identity. This process does not require dramatic overnight changes. Instead, it begins with a series of deliberate decisions that gradually reshape the person you are becoming. In the following sections, we will explore a complete guide to rebranding and reinventing yourself step by step so that you can begin creating the life you truly want starting today. Before learning how to reinvent yourself, it is important to understand why change is often so difficult. Many people assume that change requires simply working harder or finding more motivation. While motivation can be helpful at the beginning of a new journey, it is rarely strong enough to sustain long-term transformation. Motivation rises and falls depending on mood, energy levels, and circumstances. If your strategy depends entirely on motivation, progress becomes unpredictable. Another reason change feels difficult is because the brain naturally prefers familiarity. Even if our current habits are not ideal, they are comfortable because they are predictable. The mind is designed to conserve energy, which means it tends to repeat patterns that it already knows rather than creating new ones. When you attempt to reinvent yourself, you are essentially asking your brain to leave a familiar environment and step into uncertainty. There is also a psychological component that many people overlook. Over time, individuals develop internal narratives about who they are. Some people see themselves as shy, others see themselves as disorganized, and some believe they are simply not the type of person who achieves big goals. These stories become deeply embedded in the subconscious mind, influencing decisions in ways that often go unnoticed. When someone attempts to change their behavior but still believes these old narratives, the conflict between identity and action eventually leads them back to their previous habits. Understanding these obstacles is important because it reveals that personal reinvention is not just about effort. It is about replacing outdated narratives with empowering ones, designing environments that encourage better habits, and gradually reshaping the identity that guides your actions. Once you begin working at the level of identity rather than just behavior, change becomes far more sustainable. The first step in reinventing yourself is defining the person you want to become. This may sound simple, but many people skip this step entirely. They attempt to change their lives without clearly understanding what their ideal future actually looks like. Without a clear vision, it becomes difficult to stay focused because there is no specific direction guiding your decisions. Take a moment to imagine the most empowered version of yourself. This version of you wakes up with purpose, manages time effectively, treats others with confidence and respect, and consistently works toward meaningful goals. Instead of thinking only about achievements such as wealth or status, focus on the qualities that define this future identity. What kind of habits does this person practice daily? How do they respond to challenges? What values guide their decisions? When you begin to visualize this future identity in detail, something powerful happens. Your mind starts recognizing the gap between who you currently are and who you want to become. That gap becomes a roadmap for transformation. Each habit you build, each mindset you adopt, and each decision you make can gradually move you closer to that envisioned version of yourself. It is also important to remember that defining your future identity should be realistic and aligned with your genuine interests. Reinventing yourself does not mean abandoning your authentic personality. Instead, it means strengthening the qualities that bring out your best potential while leaving behind habits that limit your growth. When your future identity feels meaningful rather than forced, the process of transformation becomes much more enjoyable. Rebranding yourself begins from within. The way you speak to yourself internally plays a major role in shaping your confidence and behavior. Many people carry a constant stream of negative self-talk without realizing how much it affects their progress. Thoughts like, "I'm not good enough," "I always fail," or "I'm just not disciplined" may seem harmless in the moment. But when repeated consistently, they become powerful beliefs. Changing your mindset involves intentionally replacing these limiting narratives with more constructive ones. This does not mean blindly repeating unrealistic affirmations. Instead, it means building a new internal dialogue that reflects growth and possibility. For example, instead of telling yourself that you lack discipline, you might begin thinking of yourself as someone who is actively learning how to become more disciplined each day. Over time, this shift in mindset begins influencing your actions. When you start identifying as someone who is capable of improvement, you naturally begin making decisions that support that identity. The brain adapts to the beliefs it hears most frequently. By consistently reinforcing a growth-oriented narrative, you gradually train your mind to support your transformation rather than sabotage it. Rebranding your mindset also requires patience. Deeply rooted beliefs rarely disappear overnight. However, every time you challenge a negative narrative and replace it with a more empowering perspective, you weaken the old belief and strengthen the new one. Once your vision and mindset begin to shift, the next step is building habits that align with your new identity. Habits are the practical foundation of reinvention because they transform abstract intentions into daily actions. Without habits, even the most inspiring goals remain theoretical. The key to building effective habits is starting small. Many people attempt to reinvent themselves by dramatically changing every aspect of their routine at once. This approach often leads to burnout because the sudden increase in effort becomes difficult to maintain. Instead, Focus on introducing small but meaningful habits that gradually reinforce your new identity. For example, if your future identity includes being more disciplined and focused, you might begin by creating a simple morning routine that helps you start the day with intention. This could involve planning your priorities, reading a few pages of a book, or spending a few minutes reflecting on your goals. These small actions may seem insignificant at first, but when repeated consistently, they begin shaping your behavior in powerful ways. Consistency is far more important than intensity. A habit practiced daily, even for a short amount of time, has a greater long-term impact than a burst of extreme effort that lasts only a few days. As these habits accumulate, they create momentum that makes further improvements easier to sustain. Another powerful but often overlooked aspect of reinvention is your environment. The spaces you spend time in and the people you interact with have a significant influence on your behavior. If your environment constantly encourages distraction, negativity, or unhealthy habits, maintaining positive change becomes much more difficult. Rebranding your life sometimes requires redesigning your environment to support the person you want to become. This might involve organizing your workspace to minimize distractions, surrounding yourself with people who share similar goals, or reducing exposure to influences that drain your motivation. The content you consume daily also plays a role in shaping your mindset. Books, podcasts, educational videos, and inspiring conversations can reinforce the identity you are building. When your environment consistently supports your growth, staying committed to your new habits becomes far easier. Reinventing yourself inevitably involves moments of discomfort. Whenever you step outside familiar patterns, the mind may respond with resistance. This resistance is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a natural part of growth, just as muscles become capabilities. Each time you face a difficult situation and continue moving forward, you strengthen the identity of someone who is resilient and capable of growth. Over time, what once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. Habits that initially required effort eventually become automatic. This gradual shift is what makes reinvention sustainable. You are not forcing yourself to change constantly. You are becoming someone for whom those behaviors feel natural. The final stage of reinvention is integration. After weeks or months of practicing new habits, adjusting your mindset, and reshaping your environment, the identity you once envisioned begins to feel real. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to change. Instead, you begin experiencing life from the perspective of the person you set out to become. This transformation is rarely dramatic from one day to the next. It is the result of hundreds of small decisions that gradually shift your behavior and mindset. When you look back at your previous self, you may notice that the difference is not only visible in your actions, but also in your confidence, your priorities, and the way you approach challenges. Reinventing yourself is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process of growth and refinement. Each stage of life may invite you to evolve into a new version of yourself. The important thing is remembering that you always have the ability to redefine who you are and where you are going.